We have huge issues facing our country, and many of this are the White House's own making. Our economy is teetering in large part because of a tariff policy that is consistently inconsistent, leading in part to bad job numbers, spiking costs, and rising inflation. On the international front, we are witnessing mass starvation in Gaza in living color, and where the U.S. historically would have facilitated a coherent global response, for months our president has either talked of kicking Palestinians out of the West Bank and turning it into his vision of the Riviera, or has dithered on the sidelines. These are just two of several demanding issues that would prompt laser focus from a typical White House, especially seeing as this White House's negligence contributed, if not caused, these crises. Now instead, consider what our president decided to divert his attention to, either to try and change the subject or because he's got the attention span of a toddler with ADHD. Now, I want to preface that last week was not an outlier. It was a typical example of white noise turned up to volume 11. So, in no particular order, this is what constitutes as normal in Trump world over a week's span. Trump killed Elmo and Friends, along with NPR and PBS, because apparently publicly funded broadcasting wasn't money well spent, but diverting tax dollars to pave over the Rose Garden and build a tacky ballroom in the White House is. With an executive order, he criminalizes homelessness, saying the poor and mentally ill, they need to be locked up without providing a single dollar to help an already overwhelmed system. He directed his Justice Department to go after Jack Smith. Jack Smith was a special prosecutor who was tasked with investigating January 6th because even after pardoning all the insurrectionists who tried to overthrow our democracy and attacking police in the process, Trump, the orchestrator, somehow believes he is still the victim. Trump also decided that 2025 was the right time to relitigate the right to slur Native Americans in pro sports. Even though the ownership of the DC NFL franchise, now known as the Commanders, are more than happy with being the Commanders and don't want to return to the days of the Redskins, Trump is threatening to kill their new stadium deal if they don't revert to a team whose name is blatantly racist. Coming back to the economy, the job numbers late last week were bad, and so were the rising unemployment figures. So rather than explaining like a normal president why the data was bad and his recipe for recovery, Trump, in typical fashion, cried fake news and then fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics, a woman who I might note here he appointed to the position. It turns out, and confirmed by every occupant of that position, Republican or Democrat, including Trump's first-term head, that the numbers can't be fudged even if she wanted to, and more than 100 people are involved in the process. But to a guy who already authored the big lie of a stolen election that wasn't, and lies as easily as he breathes, the only way to explain bad data is to cry conspiracy, even among his own appointees. Which brings us to the story arguably at the root of all this misdirection. As you all remember, Trump and his acolytes, who though unqualified, would go on to become the Attorney General, FBI Director, and other critical figures in this Department of Justice. Well, during the campaign, they all promised the release of the Epstein files, replete with stunning revelations. Well, as we know, the president and longtime friend of the late Jeffrey Epstein suddenly said after winning, "Nothing to see here, and let's move on." Well, when that didn't fly with the MAGA folks, then came the pivot. After the Deputy Attorney General curiously met alone with convicted pedophile and sex trafficker Ghislaine Maxwell, Trump shockingly refused to rule out a pardon for that monster. Then, at the end of last week, she suddenly was transferred to a minimum security facility. Now, just to confirm this bizarre notion of justice among a growing chorus of a cover-up, Trump in his then wisdom decided to weigh in on Diddy's incarceration and again hinted that he didn't find his horrific behavior completely objectionable. The most petrifying part of the exercise I just laid out is this is only 1 week. And in the past 6 months, this somehow qualifies as normal. And this is a conundrum responsible media finds itself in. With threats to our democracy not seen in generations, if ever, what do we report on? And what do we ignore so as to not overwhelm an audience where the sheer volume of ineptitude, corruption, and abuse seemingly normalizes the unprecedented? I struggle with finding that balance, but I know this. This is not normal. And if we continue to condone the indefensible, I worry that 3.5 years from now, where we will find ourselves as a nation.